Hello and welcome to the recorded study guide for Unit 7. This unit basically covers two chapters. We're looking at 11 and 12. In Chapter 11, we look more at the Industrial Revolution and how things shift and change because of the Industrial Revolution, and that leads into more nationalism and things like that. And then in Chapter 12, we look more at Andrew Jackson's presidency, things that follow with that time period, Trail of Tears, and the Panic of 1837. But let's start in the beginning of our study guide with the Industrial Revolution, talking about page 363 right here. Basically, kind of things that you need to focus on in the Industrial Revolution is that it's this change that happens. And basically, it's a change from making things by hand or by hand tools. That's what this is a picture of right here, hand tools. Going to making things in factories. So that's basically this Industrial Revolution kind of in a nutshell. You're talking about this change from making things with hand tools to making them in factories. This kind of all gets started off by this guy down here, Samuel Slater, and he is on page 366. Samuel Slater is an Englishman. He is from England. That's why he's an Englishman. And at this time, the English are the only ones that have the technology to create these spinning mill factories powered by water, which produce a lot of manufactured goods. Well, Samuel Slater sneaks these secrets of the spinning mills. It's alliteration, folks. Samuel Slater sneaks the secrets of the spinning mills. Yeah. All right. So he gets those out of the English country and comes to America and sets up some factories in New England. So this guy right here is the first guy to use or build water-powered mills in America. Now he sets up the first factories that he's going to have in New England, and that's kind of what you need to put here where it's talking about factories in New England, but you need to kind of know why, and that also is being talked about on page 366. There's a few reasons. One is that these mills need water, and New England has fast-moving rivers. So New England has fast-moving rivers, so these mills can be powered, the turbines can be turned by these rivers and all that kind of stuff. The other thing is there's a lot of labor in New England because these people that are living in New England are just kind of barely scraping by. They are farming, but there's not a good soil in New England. They can't really farm a lot, or at least they can't make enough money. They can't make enough money to live off of farming in New England. So when these factories start popping up, people start thinking, I'm going to leave the countryside, leave these stupid farms, and go into the factory where I can get some real money. And that's why New England is such a great place, because you have the fast-moving rivers to power these factories, and then you also have the people that are ready to work in these factories because they don't want to do what they have been doing for years, which is farming and barely getting by. Another thing to come out of the Industrial Revolution are these new inventions and inventors and all this kind of stuff. And we're going to talk first about Eli Whitney and the first thing that he does, or one of the first things that he does in relation to this unit. What we're talking about is on page 367. We'll come back to him in just a little bit and talk about something else. But Eli Whitney is an inventor. He is going to be coming up with the next thing, which on your study guide, which is interchangeable parts, also on 367. The United States government hires Eli Whitney to make 10,000 muskets for the United States Army. And the problem at this time is when you were to build a gun, each individual part would have to be handmade, handcrafted. That gun would be made by one person that's like crafting it by hand. That takes a lot of time and a lot of energy and a lot of money, and that makes those guns expensive, so you can't really make as many. The other problem is if one little piece on that gun breaks, you either have to hand make another new piece for it, or you have to build a completely new gun. Either way, you're spending a lot of time and a lot of money. So it's not really a very good system. So Eli Whitney uses this system of interchangeable parts to totally revolutionize not only the way guns are made, but the way factories work and the way anything is made. And that's kind of what interchangeable parts are. It's if you look at this picture right here, this is a picture of what all the pieces of a gun are. Now, what he did is, instead of one person making this whole entire thing, he would have a machine that made this part, and a machine that made this part, and this part, and this part, and this part, and you get the idea. And at the end of the line, all these pieces would be able to fit together perfectly, no matter when they were made, and it would all work perfectly. So if you're a soldier out in the field and piece 40 here breaks, well, all you have to do is go get a new piece 40 and stick it in your gun, and it'll work. You don't have to go get a completely new gun. It's not something that's going to take a very long time, and it's not something that's very expensive. So what this does is it decreases the price of the gun, and it decreases the amount of money that you have to spend to make these guns, because instead of having one person and saying, you need to make me a gun, and it taking weeks, and it has to be a very skilled person and all that kind of stuff, all you have to do is hire a whole bunch of people to run the machines and press a button that make this part or whatever. And that person doesn't have to be paid as much, and it's not going to take as much time. So you end up with a product that is the same quality, but it's less expensive to make, and you can make more of them. So that's what Eli Whitney and the interchangeable part do. Speeds up production. You have less skilled workers, all that kind of stuff. Another inventor during this time is this guy right here, looking super pumped about life, Samuel F.B. Morse. He is on page 368. He invents this contraption right here, the telegraph. If you can remember his last name, Morse code. The beep 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 beep. You send messages to people through Morse code. Yeah. Okay. Basically, the telegraph sends out pulses of electricity through a wire. Somebody else gets it on the other end. They translate the dashes and dots into letters, and you can send messages all over the country in a matter of seconds when it would have taken weeks and all that kind of stuff. So now what you have is people can interact with each other faster, and it brings people a little bit closer together. The next person on your study guide is Robert Fulton. He is also on page 368. He invented the steam-powered boat, so the steamboat. This is a picture of the steamboat that he created. It's the Claremont. Basically, it's a boat that can go upstream, upriver, against the current, also without any wind. So you can basically travel a lot quicker, which means that you can do a lot of other things quicker, like trading and interacting with people all over the country. So, those things kind of help bring people together. The telegraph, the steam engine. The next thing here is Peter Cooper. It's the same kind of deal with Peter Cooper. He is on page 368 as well. And he invented the steam-powered locomotive, or the train. His first was the Tom Thumb. And, this is just the beginning of the locomotive and railroad industry. We're going to see this jump from like 23 miles of track to like 9,000 miles of track in like 20 years. It's like ridiculous. And these people can travel back and forth in between places on the steamboat and the train quickly. We can trade more efficiently. Things from the west can get to the north, and north can get to the south, and all this kind of stuff. So people interact quicker, and it makes everybody seem a lot closer together, and it promotes national unity, and it just pulls these regions of the nation closer together. One of the last inventors that we talk about in this section is John Deere, who I'm sure you are mostly all familiar with. Because of this right here, the John Deere Tractor Company, all that kind of stuff. 369 is the page. This is John Deere right here, and his invention during the Industrial Revolution that revolutionizes a lot of things is the steel plow, or the plow with the steel cutting edge. Before this invention, they would use cast iron plows, which means that you basically would get a plow that's going to break in the Midwestern soil. It was fine for New England, but this cast iron plow would just chip and break and not do much in the Midwestern soil. So John Deere creates this steel cutting edge plow, which makes the process of plowing up an entire field in the Midwest a lot easier, which means that you can plant more crops, which means you can make more money. And if you can make more money, more people are going to want to do that. So because of this plow, it makes it easier to farm. Farms increase in the Midwest, more people move out there, and the West starts to grow. And it all centers around some of this idea of the steel plow and the idea of making it easier to farm and all that kind of stuff. So the next thing on your study guide is the cotton gin, which brings us back to Eli Whitney. So when we also look at Eli Whitney, we're looking at, the interchangeable parts, but we are also looking on page 373 for him and the cotton gin. The cotton gin is another one of those agriculture inventions that speed up a lot of the production and makes it easier to produce a certain type of crop or whatever it may be, and it leads to a lot of changes in the country. So this is the cotton gin right here. Basically, it cleans cotton. It takes the cotton that has all the sticks and the twigs and the thorns and all that kind of stuff in it. You hand crank the machine. It comes out on the other side as clean cotton, and it is ready to be used, put into a factory, into a mill, and made into thread or whatever it is. So what this does is it increases the amount of cotton that you can produce from 1 pound a day per person to 50 pounds a day per person. So you now need to grow more cotton in order to keep up with the speed at which you can put it through the cotton gin. Now, at this time, the people who are going to be picking this cotton to put in the cotton gins, to produce it, to clean it, and all this kind of stuff would be slaves. So if instead of 1 pound, you need 50 pounds to put in there to clean, now you need 50 pounds to be picked by one person in the field. So what you're going to need to see happening is more and more slaves need to be brought into these plantations to pick more and more cotton. And because more and more cotton is being picked, more and more cotton can be put into the cotton gin and cleaned. So the cotton gin is a direct kind of cause of slavery in the South being increased, and that's because it encourages these southern farmers to grow more cotton, and if you're growing more cotton, you need more slaves. So that's what ends up happening in the South, greatly in part to the cotton gin. The next thing on your study guide is Nat Turner. Nat Turner can be found on page 376. Nat Turner is a slave. He leads a rebellion in Virginia, and in 1831 he leads that slave rebellion. He goes and he leads like 70 of these runaway slaves, and he kills like 55 white men, women, and children. And this is This is a rebellion aimed at trying to help the cause and, get rid of slavery and do things better for the slaves and all this kind of stuff. But in reality, what this does is it makes it harder on the slaves. It makes it to where these slave owners say, hey, we need to make sure we keep these slaves in line, so we need to pass all these laws that make the slaves have even less freedom than they already do, or make their lives even harder. So what you need to think about when you look at Nat Turner is that he led a rebellion in 1831 in Virginia, but this doesn't lead to an improvement for the slaves. It actually leads to them having less freedom, and it really hurts more than it helps. So because of some of these inventions, and also because of the War of 1812 and all of that kind of stuff, the nation becomes kind of drawn closer together, and people start having more pride and loyalty to, their country and the United States. And that is what we refer to as a sense of nationalism. And that's on page 379. So instead, before the War of 1812, people would have said that they were, from a state. Like they're from Missouri. I'm a Missourian. But after the War of 1812, that kind of takes a back seat, and people start focusing more on the fact that they are from America and they are an American. So that is what nationalism is. It's this idea that you have this loyalty and pride in your country, and rather than the state government. To increase nationalism, national unity, the United States, James Madison, also Henry Clay, put forth this idea of the American system, which is also on page 379, and it talks about a few things. They are going to have a protective tariff, which is going to help American businesses. They want to have a national bank that's going to have like one type of currency, so like $1 bill, and they want to improve transportation. So all of these things together lead to the country kind of bringing the country closer together. So instead of people buying foreign goods, people are going to buy American goods because of the tariff. Instead of Missouri having Missouri bucks and Illinois having Illinois bucks, and everybody getting confused with what cost what and how you're going to trade between two states and all this kind of stuff, and just a big mess. Everybody's going to use the dollar bill, and that's going to be because of the national bank and supporting one currency. And they're going to be able to trade easier and travel back and forth and go from one place to the next easier because of the improved transportation, because of the steamboat, because of the railroad, because of the national road that they're going to build, and all that kind of stuff. And that is all through nationalism, the American system, and all that kind of stuff. The main goal here is for all of these things to work together, the country to become closer together, and us to use all of our resources and become self-sufficient. And what that means is that the country is going to not have to rely on foreign goods, foreign countries, anything like that. We would be able to use what we have. The opposite side of the nationalism is that sectionalism starts to pop up, and that means that people start kind of having their own opinions based on what their region of the country is best at or is better for them. So in the North, they're obviously going to be focused on trade, manufacturing, factories, all that kind of stuff. In the South, agriculture, slavery. And in the West, they want cheap land sold. They want land sold cheap, and that's because they want more people to move out there and start living there. Well, the people in the North don't like that because they think if the land in the West is sold cheap, all their factory workers are going to go there, and that means that the Southerners want the factory workers to still stay there because they need people to sell their cotton to, and it's just each of these groups kind of have reasons that they don't like the other ones and all this kind of stuff. So sectionalism can be found on page 381. And this all of these different things come together and become a real big issue when we look at the Missouri Compromise. And the Missouri Compromise is something that you can find on page 382. Basically what happens is Missouri wants to become a state. There are 11 free states and there are 11 slave states at the time before Missouri. So what is going on is if there's a big vote over slavery or something, they cancel each other out because it's 11 versus 11. Now, if Missouri is going to be coming in as a state and it's going to be wanting to become a slave state, that's going to be 12 slave states and 11 free states, which means that it's unbalanced, which means that the slave states would win, which means that the northern states don't want that to happen. So they're trying to stop Missouri from becoming a state. The southern states are saying, well, you can't stop Missouri from becoming a state just because they want to have slavery. That's up to the state, not anything else. And it's just a big old mess. So Henry Clay, who is this guy down here, he's on page 382 as well. He comes up with the Missouri Compromise. So Missouri Compromise, Henry Clay, all that kind of stuff. He says that Maine is going to become a state as well as Missouri. Missouri can become a slave state, but then Maine is going to become a free state. So now we have 12 versus 12 again. It's all equal. Everything's fine for now. They also put in this line right here at the 36th parallel. So the 36th parallel, which says that above that or north of that, slavery will be banned, except for in Missouri, of course. And below that, there can still be slavery. This, works for a while, doesn't really hold on forever, but it is something that settles this argument. We have everything's equal in Congress, and we can move on with our lives. The last thing kind of in Chapter 11 that we talked about is Monroe Doctrine. And basically President Monroe writes this thing, document that states that the United States, or it states that we are saying that the Americas, both continents, are closed for colonization to Europeans, and that the United States will stay out of their business over in Europe if you stay out of North and South America. So this is all found on page 384. Basically, it's just saying, hey, don't be in our business. We won't be in yours. If you come over here, we're going to attack you and make you stop colonizing over here. What this shows is that we see ourselves as kind of like a world power. We're like one of the big boys now. We don't have to take anything from anybody. We are going to stand up for what we want, and we're going to do what we want. And Europe can't really push us around. So that's kind of the whole idea behind the Monroe Doctrine. Basically, Americas are closed. You stay out of our business. We'll stay out of yours. All right, that brings us to the end of Chapter 11, so let's move on to Chapter 12 with Andrew Jackson. When Andrew Jackson is elected to the presidency, things kind of change with who can vote and how they can vote and all this kind of stuff. We call this change in how he runs the country Jacksonian democracy, and that term is on page 397. Basically, what you're looking at in Jacksonian democracy is the idea that instead of just having the wealthy landowners being the people that can vote for president and representatives and stuff like that, Andrew Jackson wants to expand voting rights to more people, basically all white males, not just the landowners. So that's kind of the main idea of Jacksonian democracy. Looking at Andrew Jackson on page 396, just a page before, this is Andrew Jackson right here, the 7th President of the United States. Some big key events that happen in his presidency have to do with Native Americans. And basically, there's a lot of Native Americans living in the southeast region of the United States, in Tennessee, Alabama, Mississippi, Georgia, those current day states. And American settlers white settlers, are seeing these Native Americans as obstacles to progress, or kind of in the way of expanding the United States. And they want them to do one of two things. Either assimilate, which means to be absorbed into the culture, like be the same as everyone else, or leave, move west. And this all builds up, and in 1828, some gold is found on Cherokee land, and that kind of speeds up this process of moving the Native Americans farther and farther west. It kind of picks it up a little bit quicker. So Andrew Jackson asked Congress. He's a fan of moving the Native Americans. He thinks, oh well, it's gonna be fine. They're going to continue to live how they live. They just get to live in Oklahoma. Well, if you've ever been to Oklahoma, it's a little bit different than Tennessee, and the climate and the way that you can live there off of the land. It's a little different. It's like if I said, oh yeah, you get to be the same way that you are, but I'm going to move you to China now. So have fun, and you don't know the language, and you don't know how to make money or get food or anything. But, I mean, you get to do the same stuff you're doing now. That's fine, except you're going to do that in China. So have fun learning history in China when you can't speak the language. So it's difficult. So he asked Congress to pass this act, and it's the Indian Removal Act of 1830. You can find this on page 404. Basically, it does exactly what the name of it says it's going to do. It removes the Indians, and it moves them to an area known as the Indian Territory, and that is called that's where present-day Oklahoma and Kansas are. The Indian Removal Act basically sets up to where the main tribe that it's going to affect, I mean, it affects all of the tribes, but the tribe that we talk about the most are the Cherokees, and the Indian Removal Act leads to the Trail of Tears. Basically, the Trail of Tears is this forced march over thousands of miles or hundreds of miles or whatever from their regular native land all the way to the Indian Territory. 25% of them die. Nothing good really comes out of this. So Trail of Tears, page 405 to 406. Read about that. Cherokees are the ones that are most involved there. The later part of Andrew Jackson's presidency focuses around trying to destroy the Second National Bank of the United States. And this kind of all starts on page 405. Sorry, 409. I don't know. This guy, Nicholas Biddle, who is right here, he is the president of the Second Bank of the United States. So, Andrew Jackson does not like the Second Bank of the United States because he feels that the fact that Nicholas Biddle is loaning money to the people in Congress, makes the government corrupt. Because Nicholas Biddle gives these people money, and the congressmen then are kind of being controlled by him. He can say, hey, you owe me money, you should vote the way I want you to vote. Well, if that's the case, then those congressmen aren't really voting for what's in the best interest of the people of the United States. And that's kind of the problem that Andrew Jackson has with it. So he basically sets out to destroy the national bank by taking all of the federal money, all of the national government's money out of the national bank and putting it into state banks. And that effectively ruins the national bank. They go out of business. But what it does is it makes people, they can get loans whenever they want from these state banks. And a lot of people get loans, and things go great. People build houses and buy a whole bunch of stuff, and the economy booms. And, a lot of great stuff happens. But the problem is that it's not real. It's not a real substantial thing. It's like a balloon. It's like hollow. It looks big, it looks nice, but you can just pop it and it's empty inside. So what happens is that as these banks are giving out more and more loans, they're printing more and more money, and as they print more and more money, inflation goes up, and that means that the value of money goes down. And because of that, people go to these banks and they say, hey, this dollar isn't worth as much as it used to be. I want my gold back. And then more and more people start doing that, and people start freaking out and going and trying to get all their gold out. Well, eventually the banks run out of gold to give, and that means that people can't go get their gold, which means that their money's gone, and they can't get it back. And that's what causes the Panic of 1837. And this is a panic button. I tried to find a picture, but this is as best as I could do. Sorry. So this is on page 411. So during Jackson leaves office, and he's not president this time, and the next guy is Martin Van Buren, and they talk a little bit about him on page 409. He is president during the Panic of 1837, so he gets blamed for a lot of this, but really it's mainly because of what Jackson did and the state bank stuff, and yeah, no good. So Panic of 1837 happens, people don't like that, and people are unhappy, and they're down in the dumps, and things are not looking good. And when that kind of happens, new political parties start to form. And one of those is the Whigs. And on page 412, they will talk about this guy right here, William Henry Harrison. And he is elected the 9th president of the United States. He is a Whig. And yeah, the Whigs run on a campaign where they try to build this guy up as a very like Western, like mountain man, like frontiersman, all this kind of good stuff. Just all around like rustic dude. And the people in the West are like, hey, I like that guy. Let's vote for him. He's cool. And it works. And he wins. So, but at the time, he is the oldest president to be elected until Ronald Reagan. He's 68 years old. On his inauguration, he tries to explain in his big long speech about what the Whigs are and like all this stuff that he's going to do and like all these changes that he's going to make, and he's a frontiersman, and just because he's old doesn't mean that he can't still be that war hero and all that kind of stuff. And well, it's raining and it's cold and he doesn't wear a coat and it's just horrible, and he gets pneumonia and he dies, and he is president for 32 days, and so he doesn't really get to do all the things that the Whigs want to do, obviously not in 32 days. So his vice president, this guy right here, John Tyler, becomes the 10th president of the United States, and he kind of abandons a lot of the stuff that the Whigs wanted to do, so that gets kind of left behind. But what this election shows, when William Henry Harrison is elected, only for 32 days, but he's elected, it shows that the people in the West part of the United States matter, and they have a say, and they count, and by the end of this now, we have seen the United States grow in this unit, and we are going to then see how the West grows, and in turn, the United States grows to its full kind of potential in size. So that's kind of all the terms on your study guide. We're going to go to the B-level questions just real quick. All right, so when we look at the B-level questions, once again, we've mainly talked about all of these. How did the War of 1812 lead to changes in America? That is, basically focusing around the shift in the Industrial Revolution. Why did we have to have factories? Well, we had to have factories and manufacture our own stuff because we couldn't trade during the War of 1812. So that's how the War of 1812 leads to changes, because we couldn't trade. We had to manufacture stuff. How did the Industrial Revolution change the way Americans lived and worked? Well, it's a shift from farming and living in the countryside to more people moving to the cities and working in factories. And why is there that change? And how does that change affect people? What factors led to an increase in slavery in the South? Use names and examples. I think that one's pretty obvious. The cotton gin, it would be a big one. Another big one would be the need for things to be produced, like the need for more raw materials, the need for cotton in the north leads to it being grown in the south. Well, the cotton gin makes it easier to clean it, so that leads to slavery and all that kind of stuff. So factors promoted national unity. I think that one's pretty obvious too. The American system increased transportation, improved transportation, the national bank, one currency, protective tariff, bringing the nation closer together. Use examples about, the steamboat promoted national unity because blah, 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 and stuff like that. So factors increase sectional tension. Well, the people in the West wanted cheap land. People in the North didn't want that because they were worried about all their people moving out to the West and not being in the factories and blah, 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 and all that kind of inner working with all of them. Explain how Andrew Jackson helped change American democracy. That's Jacksonian democracy, which we've talked about on here, widening the political rights of people. What were two things most Americans wanted Native Americans to do? That's move or assimilate. You need to explain what each of those things would mean for the Native Americans. Why do you think Jackson and other Americans had the goal of moving Native Americans west? That's just kind of your opinion about why do they think they're an obstacle? What are they doing? Why are the white settlers not happy about the Native Americans living in this area? How did Jackson accomplish this goal? Well, that would be how did he remove the Native Americans? Well, he used the Indian Removal Act. Explain in detail the effects of the Indian Removal Act. That's like the Trail of Tears. Explain what it's like, what it is, what happened. What were some reasons that Andrew Jackson disliked the National Bank? That's all about the making loans to congressmen and corrupt practices. What are some reasons why those issues could cause problems for the people of the United States? Well, if the congressmen are listening to Nicholas Biddle, who is loaning them the money, that means they're not listening to the people that they're supposed to be representing and voting for. So that means that the people of the United States don't have a voice, which is a problem for them. What were the effects of Andrew Jackson's war on the National Bank? That has to do with the outcome in the Panic of 1870 or 1837, and the depression that follows, and all that kind of stuff. So, yeah. All right. So, there will be. You can hop on and ask questions if you have them. Up to you. Tonight on Twitter or Facebook or whatever you feel like. Just study up. You'll be fine. Don't worry about it. Just read over your study guide, watch this video again if you want, and yeah, good luck, dudes.